Well, welcome to everybody again. Next item on the agenda is the first time it's appeared on the agenda of a Board of Curators meeting, but I can say by way of short introduction that the position of student representative to the Board of Curators is a very, very important position. And I can tell you that those 9 of us who serve as board members value greatly the participation by our student curator, and in this particular case, we value Courtney's participation greatly. She has just been continues to be a real asset to the board, and we value her judgment and her recommendations and her thoughts as she participates with us in our discussions. So at this time, I'd like to call upon student representative to the Board of Curators, Courtney Lauer, who will present the first report from a student curator ever heard by the Board of Curators.
No pressure. Well, good afternoon, and first, Chairman Graham and the rest of the curators, thank you so much for allocating this time for the first ever student representative report. During my time watching the board and now having this seat, I am excited to have the opportunity to help strengthen the connection between the students of all 4 campuses and the board. A thank you to each and every one of you for valuing the student input and the feedback and asking me on each and every board issue. I first want to start by explaining how I compiled the data for this student report. I am also the chair of the Inter-Campus Student Council, and I tasked each of the student government presidents and vice presidents to bring back what they have been working on and also their concerns moving forward. In addition to gathering information from each of the campuses, I have also worked with ASUM, the student lobbying group, to look at their top priorities for the legislative year. I will begin first by looking at each campus individually. It seems appropriate to start with a hosting campus, UMSL. This past October, UMSL hosted its annual Campus Safe Walk. During this time, groups of students, faculty, and staff walked the entire campus at night to search for possible safety and security concerns. All the data from the walk was compiled and created the 2017 Safe Walk report. This report will be sent to UMSL administration and President Choi, and the UMSL students have also offered this report to the board if requested. Additionally, UMSL student government was tasked with hearing presentations from the CFO about the proposed fee and tuition increases for the fiscal year 2018. The executive team and the student senators reviewed the proposal and gave their support to the chancellor. The proposal was a 2% increase of all student fees and tuition at all levels of education. While the student government endorsed the full proposal, they also provided stipulations for enhancing student experience with those funds received from that increase. Now, next, I'm going to move on to Mizzou's campus. MSA, the undergraduate student government, and GPC, the graduate and professional student government, have been working closely together this year with numerous other groups at the campus, city, state, local, and national levels. Additionally, both report significant appreciation for the new leaders that the campus has acquired and share a sense that substantive, student-centered progress is being made. The undergraduate government has worked hard to cut $100,000 from its budget to help address the current budget deficit. Additionally, the president and vice president are frequently conducting tabling with the chancellor for more interaction with the students and informal discussions about student concerns. MSA also appointed a student to serve as a student representative on the search committee for the next Vice Chancellor of Civil Rights and Title IX. Additionally, appointments were made for representatives on other administrative working tasks. MSA has led numerous events on campus to bring awareness. Show Your Stripes, which highlights and celebrates unique stories and experiences from each individual students at Mizzou. Additionally, they have conducted campus safety walks just like they have here at UMSL. And they also conducted a Know Your Rights, which was an event to provide educational programming for students on law enforcement practices and procedures. They hosted this with the NAACP and Legion of Black Collegians, and they're also working on increasing sexual assault awareness on campus and within Columbia. GPC is eager to see Mizzou's Office of Graduate Studies be restored to the graduate school, which they believe will help Mizzou make strides in interdisciplinary research. GPC is excited for its work in improving Mizzou's non-academic career resources for PhD students, 50% of whom do not take academic jobs. The new capacity for data-driven advocacy will allow it to better collaborate with campus administrators. And additionally, a program it has funded and helped develop is called the Science on Wheels. This program gives graduate students an opportunity to convey the value of their research to rural Missourians. And it's also been profiled by the NSF, which I had to ask, and that's the National Science Foundation. Next, moving on to UMKC. Some of the students have concerns regarding budget issues that has dampened their morale across campus. This, coupled with the UMKC change of administration, has raised some more concerns. However, the students look forward to future stability and hope that will come when the new chancellor is announced. Further, the students are supportive of the Title IX process that is currently taking place. However, they would not mind if more resources to provide preventative training were to be enacted on campus. Also, at UMKC, safety is a high priority and concern for students. Students like to see the resources brought forward to provide more patrolling or surveillance in their learning environments. Lastly, the student body is grateful to the donors who have given generously to see the downtown arts campus built. The new arts campus will be great for the university, its students, and the system. Students from all of the UMKC schools derive great benefit from this arts program because it enhances critical thinking ability as well as creative thinking ability. The students hope to receive support from the curators for the school's efforts to build the new arts campus soon. And lastly, I'm going to talk about S&T. Student volunteerism has grown with the Minor Challenge program by 66% since 2013. Over the past 3 years, 55 new student organizations have been approved. Additionally, the design process for the new fitness center has been started. The building is to be completed by the spring semester of 2019. The project is budgeted to be around $3.8 million, with the funding coming entirely from student recreational fee. Also, Student Council at S&T has seen an increased level of student involvement in the past year. Between the fall of 2015 and the fall of 2016, membership has increased 67%. The students attribute this increase to the organizational restructure that took place to more effectively represent all students on campus. The Health Services Advisory Committee within the Student Council at S&T was tasked with looking at the services provided by that student health fee to ensure that that fee is being used responsibly. And lastly, they are working with the administration on campus to help with gaining additional resources for the mental health services on S&T's campus. This includes additional professional support and services. The topic of mental health has continued to become a larger discussion all across campus, and the students of the university are creating collaborations throughout campus to work throughout the difficult topic and to create working solutions. And finally, I want to just mention to you the priorities for ASUM, the student lobbying group. First, they are advocating for access to mental health services. The demand for counseling services and self-reported prevalence of mental health issues is increasing, and broad and collective action is needed. Secondly, ASUM is looking at sexual assault prevention. Their research shows that the significant portion of forcible rape takes place during the first semester of college. ASUM is looking at and asking for legislation to add consent and sexual violence to high school health curriculum. Additionally, ASUM would ask in the alternative that increased funding to Title IX services would be provided to campuses. Next, ASUM is looking at college affordability. They are asking for measures to help accomplish by state appropriations, implementing student borrower protections, establishing a statewide work-study program, or increasing funding for needs-based scholarships. ASUM is also opposed to campus carry, for a voting student curator, for a STEM initiative, and for the MOST fellowship program. Lastly, all students are thankful for the board support of the It's On Us at the last regular board meeting. So each student extends their thank you for your support. Thank you. I appreciate your attention and time to these issues that are currently on students' minds. The work of all students to help the university run do not go unseen, and I want to thank all the student leaders who helped make this report possible. I would also like to open the floor to any discussions, or questions, and if I do not have an answer, I would hope to point you in the right direction. Furthermore, if this is a piece that becomes more of a solid report in each of the board meetings going forward, the students and myself would love some feedback on what the board members would like to hear. Thank you.
Thank you, Courtney. Question? Questions from the board, comments?
I guess I'd have one question. I think we're all concerned about the mental health of students on campus, given acts of violence that will occur from time to time, harassment and so forth. Do you think that the length of time it takes to see a counselor, a psychologist, or a professional is at this point at a critical stage? Do you have to make appointments far in advance unless it's an emergency like the night of an event? I understand we're increasing the staffing, but has it reached the critical stage? Because we're having more reports, people are feeling a bit more comfortable in reporting events.
So I don't want to give you the wrong information because I'm only familiar with Mizzou's health services and how they operate. But there were reports from students on Mizzou's campus who were unable to gain a mental health appointment within the upcoming weeks. So I think there's a few weeks of wait time for new patients, but I'm not sure that is always across the board. I think it fluctuates during holiday seasons, different times on campus, but I can find out a better, more well-rounded answer for you.
Thank you.
The questions, comments?
I would just like to add the comment, Courtney, I thought that was wonderful. I think you did a really great job giving us our first synopsis of what the students are feeling across the 4 campuses, so thank you for that.
Thank you.
And I certainly agree. I know the rest of the board agrees. And Courtney, we thank you for the excellent job you're doing representing the students on this board.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. There are 7 items, as indicated on page 2, of items to consider on the consent agenda. Do I hear a motion?
I'll make it.
Second.
We have a motion and a second that the 7 items listed on the consent agenda be approved. Cindy, would you call the roll?
Curator Burnsick?
Yes.
Curator Chapman?
Yes.
Curator Farmer?
Yes.
Curator Graham?
Yes.
Curator Lehman?
Yes.
Curator Phillips?
Yes.
Curator Snowden?
Yes.
Curator Steelman?
Yes.
Curator Sunvolt?
Yes.
Motion carried, and those 7 items will be approved, and the information relative to those 7 items were in the materials that were given to us prior to the meeting. Next, Curator Chapman, the Governance Committee will reconvene, and we'll turn it over to you as chair.
Thank you, Chairman Graham. The Governance Committee has 2 information items and 2 action items today. We'll start with the information items. First is the review of the collective rules and regulations. Julia has been doing a lot of work on that and has really worked hard, talked to a lot of people, gathered a lot of information. So Julia, why don't you tell us or give us a status update on some of the things you've done.
Sure, thank you, Curator Chapman. It's a big project. No surprise to many in the room. Since the last board meeting, we have basically put together a team of folks who've been gathering the governing rules from other aspirational state schools and trying to organize the rules in a format that'll make them easier to review and compare apples to apples. Administratively, it's been a very large project. And an attorney, Nick Beidler, on Steve Owen's team has been very, very helpful in this respect. A lot of great progress is being made. We have much more work to do, but we hope to at least have sort of the first iteration of this monster chart, as I like to call it, ready at least for review at the next board meeting. While I'm new to the board, those with a lot more collective wisdom and experience than I have pointed out that the faculty-facing rules are going to be the most time-consuming in terms of the amount of time that we'll need to review them. The CRRs are, of course, organized by subject matter, and the faculty-facing rules take up maybe half, if you were to organize them by number of subjects, half of the rules. So I've spoken with a number of folks about meeting with the IFC soon. Steve Graham has graciously agreed to introduce me to some of the members that I didn't meet this morning at breakfast, to kind of hand them over to them. Shared governance obviously being a very important principle that we all agree must be abided by. We want to meet with them earlier and figure out what the right process will be, and work very closely with them in understanding what that process will be. So it's kind of like the waves of an ocean. We're just going to keep rolling these out in additional waves as they're compiled and put together in a format that is at least easier to review. And again, these are simply schools that we had taken from the latest U.S. News and World Report rankings that were state schools with aspirational rankings. Certainly, by no means are we limited to comparing our rules to these other schools that I've sort of randomly selected, just using these as a starting point for hopefully a very daunting task to make it a little bit easier.
Have you hit any roadblocks or challenges as you've been doing this?
It just takes a lot of time. The rules are all organized differently, and when you're trying to compare apples to apples, they're obviously not all in the same sections as we've got them organized. But I think it's coming together really well, and we will have, I think, something for at least for the board's review at the next meeting.
Does anyone have any questions?
If I could ask a question, have we, it may be too early for it, have we considered time frames or setting schedules on any of these? Maybe doing that.
I think we might be in a better position after we've had a chance to meet with the IFC. I think that's going to take a lot of time. I think some of the sections will be easier to review, like maybe the board bylaws, the board rules themselves, but we would obviously be able to come to some agreement on if we were to change committee structures, things like that. But no, I don't have any time frame at this point.
And Julia, can I ask you, is there a report due at some point in time this month, or have we already taken care of that, or am I mistaken?
That's a good question. I would have to turn that to President Choi. I know there was a December 31st? I think we've been providing some updates to the state with respect to the CRR review throughout the year.
Oh, yeah.
I know there was a deadline in the Review Commission's report of the end of this year, and I don't know if we've already satisfied that.
Not yet. We are meeting with the commission on the 18th. We want to bring back the chair and the co-chair and meet with select members of the curators to talk about the progress that we've made, not only in the CRRs, but more broadly, meeting the objectives of the commission report. And after that, we'll be complying with state regulations regarding submission of information.
Thank you, Julia. Thank you, President Choi. Any other questions regarding the collective rule review? Okay, we'll move on. The next information item is the residence hall naming working group report. Just a little bit of a background here. After our retreat, I spoke with Marcy, Dr. Choi, I think a couple of other curators about student concerns regarding naming of a residence hall. I believe that hall is called New Hall at this point in time. They haven't given it any real name. And we decided, Marcy took the initiative to put together a working group of very fine faculty, staff, and students, and let me and Courtney take the lead on getting folks together and determining the best name for this new building. So we got together on November 7th. each person was tasked, there was probably, I don't know, about 10 people on the committee. Each person, or the working group, each person was tasked with talking to either alumni, student groups, staff, and faculty to determine what recommendations they had for naming the new residence hall. After they put a lot of work into it, we met and they reported to us, and Lucille Bluford was what the majority of people wanted, the vast majority actually. And Ms. Bluford, if any of you don't know the history, she was an African-American woman that was initially denied, or that was denied the ability to go to school here at MU, then went on to have a very successful career in journalism. John, I know there's some people on this board that actually knew her, and so John, why don't you, I want to give her the respect that she deserves and the detail that she deserves. So if you don't mind, maybe you could give us a few details about her life and what she did.
Well, she was an icon for reporting for the minority community in Kansas City, and attended every board meeting of the school board for many, many years. Highly respected, a good journalist, published The Call, and was kind of a revered lady. So in Kansas City, she really is honored. And I think it's fitting that the hall be named for her because she succeeded despite not being admitted back in the day. Hopefully that's changed.
That's right. And anyone else? I know, Phil, you've always had great comments about
Yes, I knew Lucille personally, and I liked her very much. She was bright. She was, a great writer. She had the greatest respect of the metropolitan area, and certainly she was a beloved figure in the minority community.
Anyone else? Well, I just want to know, as an African American and just as a graduate of MU, I find this fantastic that we're going to do this and name this residence hall after Ms. Bluford. But we'll get there eventually. At the February 2nd meeting, the plan is to present our recommendation to Gary Ward, and then who's going to present it to Chancellor Cartwright, and then we're going to move forward from there. So right now, what our working group has done after putting in hours and hours of work to get the recommendations is they've put a letter together. I think it's already been sent off to Mr. Ward. Maybe it's been copied. I think Chancellor Cartwright already has a copy as well. And then we'll discuss it at our next meeting, which will be at MU. I asked them if they wanted to move it up to this meeting, and they said that they felt like it would be better to do it at MU, and I think that made a lot of sense. So, so that's where we're at on that. Any questions? This is an absolutely wonderful thing, very collaborative, and I really enjoyed, once again, going to that point of shared governance and talking to all the different groups. I'm glad we could reach consensus and move things forward. Okay, we have two action items. Amendment of Collective Rules and Regulation 10.03 of the board bylaws. Thank you, Steve, for all of your help with this. Steve was a guiding force. This was a very simple thing, but as a new board member, you need folks to help you out sometimes. But at our last board meeting, we talked about this rule. Currently, the board bylaws require a roll call vote after any decision is made. The Sunshine, and correct me if I'm wrong, Steve, but the Sunshine Law only requires roll call votes whenever we're in executive session or closed session and making decisions in that environment. We don't. Is that correct, Steve?
It also requires a roll call vote to go into executive session.
And a roll call vote to go into executive session. So what we wanted to do was streamline that process, allow voice votes, and just simplify things. So we brought that up at the last meeting. The board had no comments on it. So what we did was put together a proposal. The board bylaws also require 30 days notice for any bylaw changes, 30 days notice to the other members of the board. And we sent that out early November. We didn't get any responses back. So we assumed that meant that the board was okay with it. Can we have some discussion here if anyone has any comments? Does anyone have any comments or questions about it? Okay. So with no comments, can I get a motion to accept the change in the board bylaws that require a roll call vote and changing that so that we can use voice votes instead. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Be from the committee.
Yes, has to come from the committee.
I second.
Okay. Okay, after a motion, we've had our motion, a second. The committee board chair in the future, the committee or board chair will call a vote by saying in this manner, all those in favor signify by saying aye. All those opposed signify by saying nay. Are there any abstentions? So if the vote is not unanimous, including abstentions, the committee or board chair will ask the secretary for a roll call vote at that point in time by saying, we do not have a unanimous vote, therefore we will proceed to a roll call vote. Cindy, please call the roll of the committee or full board. Cindy will call the roll and record the votes as we have previously always done. The vote is unanimous. If it was a committee vote, the committee chair will refer the matter to the board chair for consideration by the full board by saying, Mr. Chairman, on behalf of the committee, and so on. If it was a full board vote, consideration of the matter then will be finished. So, Cindy, did you catch all that? Okay. So maybe we can try it out here at some point in time. We don't have to do it right now. But we will make those revisions, Steve, and move forward.
Need a motion from the committee to approve.
Okay. So can I get a?
Got a motion and a second. So the irony here is you have to have a roll call vote.
We have to have roll call vote for
Have to have
this.
a roll call for this one. Okay. So with a motion and a second, Cindy, can you please call the roll?
Curator Burnsick?
Yes.
Curator Chapman?
Yes.
Curator Steelman?
Yes.
Okay, you have all committee votes in favor.
Okay.
The chair make a motion to the board to approve.
Yes. So we'll go to the full board now. Okay. So can I get a motion from the full board to approve?
Move approval.
Second.
Cindy, would you call the roll?
Curator Burnsick?
Yes.
Curator Chapman?
Yes.
Curator Farmer?
Yes.
Curator Graham?
Yes.
Curator Lehman?
Yes.
Curator Phillips?
Yes.
Curator Snowden?
Yes?
Curator Steelman?
Yes.
Curator Sunvolt?
Yes.
All votes in favor.
All right. So the next motion would be to adjourn. Is there any other discussion or questions? Okay. The next motion would be to adjourn the governance committee meeting. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
A second.
Dave.
Are we, is it in effect now?
It's in effect now.
All right.
I didn't want
We
to
still
try
need
it.
a motion in a
To
second.
adjourn, yeah.
I second it.
Cindy, can you please call the roll to adjourn the
No need
governance
to.
committee?
All those in favor?
All those.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. All opposed signify by saying nay. Are there any abstentions?
Maybe in the future we can do it in unison. We don't have to.
That's right. Boy.
Roll call. You're adjourned.
Is that it? We're adjourned.
You're good.
Okay.
That's great.
I guess I should have learned how to do the old way first.
Okay,
think we're
thank you. Next item on the public agenda is the audit committee. Curator Farmer?
Sure. So, in the October meeting, Vice President Rapp presented the fiscal year 2017 status report based on the audited financial statements of the university. Rachel Dwiggins, partner at BKD, will present the fiscal year 2017 external audit report and the required.
Jamie, sorry. Mr. Chairman, I think the Finance Committee is actually next.
I did.
But I would certainly defer to curator.
You jumped over
Yeah,
David.
but I don't
I
think
can
our,
say that again later.
Three right below the.
yeah.
I know David's
The BKD
insignificant,
reps
but
aren't
he's
here
not
yet.
that
Oh, I'm
insignificant.
sorry.
Oh, good.
Okay,
I wasn't ready to go. Good thing I had this pulled up.
Yeah.
You were ready to go.
Now, I will point out we are creatures of habit. Changing the rules is obviously.
I was looking, no, we will let Curator
I saw
Steelman
Mr. Rapp
his
going.
Finance Committee.
Yeah, he was looked a little frantic, didn't he? Okay, am I up now?
You are.
All right. I would like to call rather frantic Vice President Ryan Rapp. We have one information item and 4 action items, and Vice President Rapp will review the project design for the south expansion at the MU Memorial Stadium.
Thank you, Curator Steelman. As you note in your mailing materials, there's a design update. We're required to bring this forward as an information item to the board. I'll actually note when we move on to the action item on the collected rule, we're proposing that it would no longer be required to present design projects to the board, but that we would simply provide them. So I'm not going to go through the slides, but I would tell you this, the current schedule would have the project completed in July of 2019 or August of 2019. Tear down of the south end zone is scheduled to begin in March of 2018. So we'll only have one season where we're actually under construction. But I'd welcome any questions the board might have on the design.
Let me ask one. Is the price still maintaining? Because I know the
yes, we are still in our budget.
Okay. And has all of the excavation and the complicated issues been resolved?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. And you'll actually start to see construction begin there March 1st on tearing down the south end zone.
Any questions or comments?
I just hope it turns out as good as it looks on paper.
That's right. Okay, if there are no other questions or comments on that, I want to move to an action item, which is an amendment to the collected rules and regulations 70.060. Everybody on the board is well aware that we approved a new capital planning process beginning with fiscal year 2019. We have actually also taken the first step in the what will become part of the rules, the initial capital improvements meeting, a special meeting, which henceforth, if this rule is approved, is going to be scheduled regularly when we schedule all the meetings, right,
Yes.
Cindy? Yes. And in order to align the new process with the rules, we've got these revisions in the rule, which you've got in your material, but which Ryan will go over now.
So in your materials, there's a brief summary that just highlights how this aligns with the process that was adopted in September. A couple of the changes we're looking to make is just to align the master plan approval with the 5-year plan, also outlining the levels at which board approval is required. I want to be clear, it's $5 million for new projects, $8 million for renovation, and then total spend will have to be approved by the board as well. So total capital spend would be something that would be approved as part of that process. The other thing that I noted earlier is that we're replacing on the design requirements rather than present. We'll just provide the design update to the board, so you'll receive the same information you do today, we just won't present it. And then we'll also have the annual status report on all projects that were approved by the board. So that would actually be done at the June meeting when we finalize our 5-year capital plan, and that'll work on an annual cycle. One of the things I wanted to point out is really through the work group we had, one of the things we wanted to establish too is if you look at one of the very first points in there, it actually notes that the board has an active role in establishing capital plans and priorities. It was something that we felt was important to note as we went through the work group, and we've also put this into the actual rule itself. So I'd welcome any questions about any of the changes, but other than that, they're largely taking what was approved in September and implementing it into our collected rules.
Any questions or comments, discussion? This has been discussed quite a bit. Again, as the board knows, what this is an effort to establish the board's proactive role in capital improvements, and I think is a good step forward. And in fact, this is the kind of budgetary step that Rick Baniak, who helped put this together, played a key role, has also started a broader budgetary process, which this is similar to at UMSL. So could I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, now let me make sure. Thank you, Julia. I see it's hard for an old dog here. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 All opposed? Any abstentions? Now, do I understand then it is declared passed? Is that how we're doing it?
At the committee.
At the committee level, okay. Mr. Chairman, may I be recognized to make a
May.
motion? Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to the full board that we approve the collected rules and regulations 70.060, the changes to the capital Consulting, Design, and Construction as per the copy that is in your materials.
Is there a second?
Second?
A motion and a second?
It's hard, isn't it?
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carried. Next item.
Okay, now, we've got the project approval, and this is, again, so that everybody knows, we specifically excluded some projects that were already in the works from the change to the rules, so we're actually stepping or skipping a step that would be in the new rules on this one, right? Did I get that right?
Correct. For some of the FY18 projects, they would go from Gate A approval directly to Gate C.
And that's what we're doing here right now. So Ryan will introduce and present the project approval of the Advanced Construction Material Laboratory on the Missouri University of Science and Technology campus.
So this is a project that we discussed in November. It's a $6.5 million project. We have $3.1 million in private gifts. The system is providing $1.7 million in funding from our central bank dividend, and then $1.7 million is being funded from the campus. I believe that largely, I'm looking at Chancellor Maples, I believe we had one large donor that primarily made this possible. But I think it's an exciting project for the campus. Will help them in their efforts to grow research. And welcome any questions the board might have.
Any questions, comments? Okay. If there's no further discussion, may I have a motion and a second from the Finance Committee to recommend to the full board that the project approval for the Advanced Construction Material Laboratory project at Missouri University of Science and Technology be approved?
Second.
Okay. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? Motion carried. Mr. Chairman, could I be recognized for a motion?
Ready for a motion.
I would like to recommend to the full board that the Advanced Construction Material Laboratory on the Missouri University of Science and Technology project to be approved.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor of action item 2, having to do with the construction materials laboratory, say aye.
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 All opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carried.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, Ryan will now introduce and present the project approval of the University of Missouri Kansas City School of Computing and Engineering Education and Research Center. Ryan, if I could ask too, I think the history of this and how this is getting approved is fairly important.
Sure. I'll kind of, this is a combined project. Originally, the campus had contemplated a standalone free enterprise center along with the School of Computing and Engineering Education and Research Center. We had funding appropriated to us from the state 2 years ago to move forward with the free enterprise center as well as private donations. And the money was withheld and then it has been reappropriated to us. During that time, it actually allowed the campus to think about, would there be a way to combine the elements of the Free Enterprise Center and the Education and Research Center into one building. And so that's what this really represents, is the combination of those two concepts. The total project is $32 million. Almost $25 million of that's been raised in private gifts. There's $2 million that we've got in a federal grant for equipment. And then we would look to be using $5.4 million of the funding that was reappropriated to us by the state. So this would allow us to move forward with both projects in one building, and we're very excited about this concept. And unlike the project I just noted for ACML, I don't believe this wasn't just one large gift from one donor. I think the campus has been working very hard on raising support for this project. So I'd welcome any questions.
Any questions, comments? John, I thought you might comment, but if
I comment favorably, and also appreciation for those private donors who had originally committed for the entrepreneurial center, who have graciously agreed to allow it to be recommitted to this building. And so working with private donors, it's successful, and compliments to the chancellor for making that happen.
if I can editorialize briefly, we talk about collaboration. This was a remarkable collaboration between the campus, the system, and the private sector who were making the donations, and is a very valuable building, not just for UMKC, but for the state of Missouri and the Kansas City region in workforce development, and this is a real example of how this should be done. Could I have a motion and a second if there's no other discussion?
So moved.
Second. Okay. All in favor signify by saying aye, please.
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carried. Mr. Chairman, could I be recognized for a motion? I recommend to the entire board that the School of Computing and Engineering Education and Research Center project as described by Ryan and is presented in your materials be approved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second that the School of Computing and Engineering proposal number 3 be approved. All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carried.
Mr. Chairman, I believe we have one more item, and I think it's going to be presented by Tom Richards. Am I missing something?
Tom and Mary Ann and I were going to present, running late, but I think we can go ahead and present Tom.
Okay, okay. We're going to move on to this action item, which is the approval of the retirement plan actuarial assumptions.
Thank you, Curator Stillman. I'll introduce Mary Ann. She is one of our actuaries that has worked with us. She will go through the first couple slides to review the plan and actuarial assumptions that we're asking the board to approve today, and then I'll wrap it up with some closing remarks in the presentation. But with that, I'll turn it over to Mary Ann.
Okay.
On the first slide, move ahead. Thank you. So at the September meeting, the Board of Curators adopted a new asset allocation, which set the return assumption at 7.2. And so in the past, the university has done experience studies, I would say, on a 5-year cycle, which is typical. But because of this change in the asset allocation, it decided to move it up a year, because this is a significant assumption for the plan, and so it's decided that all the assumptions should be looked at in total. And so because of that, we moved it up a year, and so the results are what we've seen. Moving ahead. So the goal of the experience study, again, is to align your experience that's emerging in the plan with what your expectations are, and it's to see if your current assumptions are reasonable and if any changes are needed. And so Siegel reviewed the experience from 2012 to 2016, and the review is summarized in the next few slides. So retirement and severance, these are two of the largest demographic assumptions that hit the plan. And so on the retirement rates, and actually on both retirement and termination, there are differences between academic and administrative groups versus the clerical and service groups. And so on the retirement side, what we're seeing is that the rates are actually showing continued employment to age 80, which would be an extension from the current assumption of age 72. There's a little bit of people who have longer service that are retiring at earlier ages, but basically the largest change is that people are continuing with employment. On the severance rates, remember, this is looking at the assumptions, how they are compared to the experience that's emerging. And so the turnover is just a little bit higher than was previously done. And also the assumptions used to be by gender, but the experience that's emerging is showing that males and females are not terminating at different rates, and so therefore assumptions that are different are not warranted. And again, there's those differences between the groups of academic and administrative versus clerical and service. And just so you know, really clerical and service employees are having higher rates of turnover. Mortality. So before we looked at assumptions that are, I would say they're specific to the university because you have high rates of incidents and you have a large enough group that the assumptions can be considered credible. For mortality, it's hard to get a large enough sample size in order to be credible, and so typically you rely on studies performed by the Society of Actuaries. Remember that mortality is the rate in which people will pass away, and so for pension plans, this is a very important assumption as it determines how long those pension payments will be made. Previously, you used what is the RP 2000 and then a projection scale. These are actuarial terms, and at that time, that was the most up-to-date mortality table available by the Society of Actuaries. Now, since the study's been done, there's a new table by the Society of Actuaries. It's called RP 2014 and has a projection scale. This is the latest table that's available and is a very standard table used in industry. So the suggestion is to move to this table. What this does, it actually provides for longer life expectancy, so it's showing that people are living longer. It also is a generational table, which just means that you're assuming continued improvement in mortality throughout life. Moving ahead to the economic assumptions, so salary rates and inflation. When the salary rates are looked at, they really are broken down into two components. Inflation, which you could say is like a cost of living, and then merit, promotion, longevity, that type of rate. So when we look at them in their two components, the rate that's net of inflation was generally higher for those in the earlier part of their career, so younger individuals, and then remained unchanged for those mid-career, and then dropped somewhat for those in the retirement zone. Again, there's differences between the academic and administrative versus clerical and service, with the academic and administrative being a little bit higher. And so with that, we have the inflation rate, which is where the change is really coming in. Previously, the inflation was 2.75. And the recommended inflation rate is dropping 55 basis points to 2.2 to be more in line with what is expected for future market conditions, because remember, these are forward-looking rates. So when you add the two components together, you know, the merit and promotion plus the inflation, overall the salary increase assumption is going down, but that is largely due to the change in the inflation assumption going down 55 basis points. The investment return, just like we saw, so investment return is really the long-term rate of return that you're assumed to get on your plan assets. This is what's used to value the plan's liabilities. This is basically the rate at which all future expected benefit payments are discounted back to today. Now, the plan's current target allocation, the recommended investment return assumption is 7.2. Largely, this is in step with the inflation assumption dropping 55 basis points, because previously the assumption was 7.75. So again, it's stepping and keeping in line with the inflation dropping. This slide shows a spectrum of how the investment return assumption compares across major state pension plans, and you can see where the system's current assumption of 7.75 is at the higher end of the spectrum, and then moving to 7.2 drops it to be probably where you're going to see more folks go. Sometimes there's a lag in some of this reporting.
Thanks, Mary Ann. I'll just go back to this previous slide and then try to kind of translate into what does this mean for us financially. But I do want to highlight, she noted this data lags. It was produced in October 2017, but keep in mind, you know, as we make changes, we're looking forward. This is looking back. This is just showing where we're at 7.75, we're kind of on the high end when we look at pension plans. If we were to move to 7.2, we'd be closer to the leading edge of where others are. So if you, this slide is busy. I'll get to what it really means on the next slide, but if you go through this, it actually details what each one of the assumptions Mary Ann went through means for us. So you can see what the impact that the change in retirement rate has on our normal cost, our unfunded liability, and our net employer contribution. You can see that most of the assumptions that are looking at are actually driving down the cost of the plan. The primary driver in the increased cost, as you can see, is with the change in the interest rate assumption. That change, though, is consistent with the asset allocation that the board approved in September. So I wanted to draw that connection. So if you kind of just say in summary, what does this mean? If these assumptions were approved, what it means is our current unfunded liability of $244 million would increase by $450 million to $700 million. Also, our annual cost, our annual contribution that we're required to put into the plan would go up from $94 million to $112 million, almost an $18 million increase. It also would move the funded status of the plan from the high 80s down towards 83%. Relatively speaking, that's still well funded when you look across the pension world. But I think as we start to look forward and we say, if approved, what would be the next steps? I think over time, we have done a really good job. This previous boards, previous administrations have done a good job of making sure that we have a sustainable plan that's competitive and affordable. But I think you have to look forward and understand what are we facing. And so one of the things that will be critical is that as we look at the plan as we move forward, is it competitive, but also is it something that we can afford and will it remain sustainable? And I do want to note, all of these assumptions are built on current performance. I want to highlight, as Tom reminded me, we're in the midst of one of the longest running equity bull markets. So a bad market event has a significant impact on not just our plan, any plan. These are trends that not just we're dealing with, but trends that I think all pension plans across the country are dealing with. And I think if we were to approve these rates and changes moving forward, we'll continue to show that we've been proactive in managing the challenges that we face as a university. So with that, I'd open that up for any questions the board might have.
Questions, comments?
So Ryan, this is going to have about an $18 million impact on our annual bottom line?
Yeah, and it will also have a significant impact on our balance sheet, about a $500 million increase in the liability.
Sounds like an expensive change.
Yeah, I think it is, and I think that's one of the things as we move forward. We do want to have a retirement plan that is competitive. We want to have a total compensation package that's competitive, but I'll highlight, it also has to be affordable and sustainable. And so by making these changes, it acknowledges the challenges that we face.
Is this affordable?
So I think with all of the headwinds we're facing, as an institution, that's something we'd have to really take a look at and understand what is the plan that we can afford as we move forward, but yet remain competitive. That is something we could look at.
Can you do that?
Yeah, we could do that over, I think if we could have some time to take a look at that, and we would be happy to come back to the board and report that.
Did one of your slides, maybe the second one, indicate that the last time we did the adjustment was 2013?
Yes, I believe that's correct.
So we're taking a look at it and changing it for the first time in 4 years.
Typically, we've done a quinquennium, a 5-year study.
On a 5-year study?
Yeah, and with the significant change in our asset allocation, we felt like we were at the point in time where we needed to go ahead and look at it.
So if there's a significant market correction, given the length of the bull run, and we don't make an increased contribution, are we more likely to run below the 80% funded? Is that why we're doing this, is to sort of get ahead of the headwinds in that respect?
So if you look at the second bullet there, we have a retirement stabilization fund that was actually formed by a previous board. I believe it has a little over $100 million set aside in it. That sounds like a lot of money in absolute terms, and it is. But keep in mind that we've got almost $3.7 billion in assets. I think the total liability is around $4 billion. What that allows us to do is it gives us a longer runway from a planning standpoint. It doesn't take the longer term challenge away of how do you get to a plan that's competitive but also sustainable and affordable.
So Ryan, would you be able to review what options may be available to us to have both a competitive and a sustainable plan by the next board meeting, or would that be too
I think
aggressive?
we could probably discuss what's affordable as far as when you start talking about the plan design. That's something that I think would be more of a year-long process. One is it needs to be an engaged process. If it's simply if the goal is simply to just reduce the cost of the plan, the cost that we have for the plan, you could do that relatively easy, but your problem is you're going to hurt your recruitment and retention. So I think it has to be a thoughtful process where I think you've got two things. You're trying to say, how do we maintain a competitive plan, which we've done to date, but as we look forward, how do we continue to make sure we're competitively positioned with the key caveat of it's got to be affordable. So I think that would be important for us to bring back to the board.
Ryan, let me ask you, John mentioned 80% on on unfunded liabilities. If we fall below that, do you think we're getting into dangerous territory, or are we still pretty well funded compared to others?
So in relative terms, we look really good. I've always said, relatively speaking, I feel really good about this. In absolute terms, it's still a concern. So my point being is a significant market event would hurt us, relatively speaking, just as much as everyone, because everyone's going to, now there will be plans in worse shape, but our costs will go up if you have a significant market event.
Brian, you mentioned obviously that a significant market event would hurt the portfolio. Do you also agree that with interest rates moving up, that could affect part of the portfolio also?
Yeah, absolutely.
Maybe even a bigger risk, quite frankly.
Yeah, I think that's from the standpoint, from a CFO standpoint, I will tell you what I look for in a retirement plan is not so much what type of plan do we offer, but I want a plan where we understand what the cost is and can we plan around it and can we afford it. And so, to me, it's about what's the level of risk that we can handle as a university, and how do we get to something that has more stability to it when we look out and plan into the future.
Can I also ask, obviously I've seen a lot of institutions, corporations, you name it, move from defined benefit to defined contribution. Is that something that should at least be considered thoughtfully?
So I think it's something for us to think about, and I think to Curator Burnsick's point, that is something, if you looked at plan design, we could look at over the next year. I think that, and the one thing I want to highlight is any changes. Pension plans are these really long-term animals. So I've said, when you look at it, if you say I'm going to make a change, really a change over the next year to 2 years, when they're intended to really exist in perpetuity, that's moving quickly. What I want you all to understand is, I think competitively we're better positioned than most plans and most universities to manage that change. The risk I'm discussing here isn't unique to this institution. I think it's a risk that you see across the industry. What I think we should take comfort in is we have the opportunity to do something about it proactively rather than just reacting to it. And we have the financial strength with our current plan that allows us to do that. But I think absolutely, your question is, if we were to look at that, is that something we'd want to consider carefully? Yes.
Didn't we gradually get into that 4 or 5 years ago when the new hires aren't totally defined benefit? And so any new hire comes in with a blend. The others were grandfathered in, but I don't think there's any increase in benefit to them.
Correct.
So I think it's a really good point. Some in private industry went cold turkey with great unhappiness, and to do that in the public sector, I think, would create a mass exodus. But doing it over time is less painful, and I actually think there's growing appreciation among employees for defined contribution because there's some attributes to that, and in the current market it looks pretty good. I do have a question for you. If we fall substantially before the 80% funded, how would that affect our Moody's or bond rating?
So I think it would affect us just like it would affect everyone else in the industry. Moody's and S&P continue to look at our pension liability. They look at it differently than it's reported under governmental accounting standards. So it is already baked into our current credit rating. Simply put, if we have a negative market event that hurts our funded ratio just like everyone else, it's going to be viewed as a credit negative.
But what you're recommending and what administration is recommending is that we go ahead and adopt a modest change so that it's less likely that we'll fall below the 80%. Is that fair?
Well, so they're not looking at the funded ratio. I won't get into the nuances of how they discount it back, but they're not even using the 7.2%. They use a much lower rate to discount back that liability. So they would actually view the action taken today as a positive. because you're going to be putting more funding into the plan. I think for retirees and current employees, if you looked at this action, they should feel good from the standpoint of the board is committing to ensuring the health of the current plan we have. But as Curator Burnsick has noted, I think we have to be willing to look forward and say, what does the plan need to look like as we move into the future? And it needs to be one that allows us to continue to be competitive, but also affordable.
So what you're recommending is a fairly modest change, but one that would safeguard us a little bit more against lower ratings, and we continue to look at plan design.
Yes.
Any other questions, comments? If there is no further discussion, may I have a motion and a second from the Finance Committee to recommend to the full board that the retirement plan actuarial assumptions for the University of Missouri's defined benefit plan be changed as recommended in the report on actuarial valuation assumption study based on 2002 through 2016 actuarial experience prepared by Siegel Consulting and is presented to the board.
So moved.
Second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carried. Mr. Chairman, have you recognized?
Motion?
I do. I might also say, and I know everybody's tired of me saying this, that this move and the way that this board is handling this is a real testament to the finance team. Tom Richards, who has arrived, hadn't he? Tom? We appreciate very much your efforts in socializing this and working through this. This actually, it's interesting that the last time this was presented, I think it failed on a tie vote. Is that right? And so the fact that this board and this finance committee are dealing with this rather difficult and thorny issue in such an expeditious manner, I think is a testament to both the finance team and to the board. And with that, I move that the retirement plan actuarial assumptions, as I just stated in the earlier motion, be changed as recommended.
Do you have a second?
Second.
A motion and a second. All in favor of the amendments to the actuarial assumptions in connection with the retirement plan, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Abstentions? Motion carried.
I believe that concludes the business of the Finance Committee. May I have a motion from the committee to adjourn the Finance Committee?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carried.
Next item on the agenda is the Academic Student External Affairs, Curator Snowden.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
By the way, by my calculations, we saved 5 minutes and 14 seconds by voice vote.
Academic Student and External Affairs Committee has 2 information items and 3 action items today. And our first information item is the Research and Economic Development Annual Report. Mark McIntosh, if you will come forward. Dr. Mark McIntosh.
Thank you. Cindy is passing out a copy of the slide, so I'll wait till you get a copy and then we get started. First of all, let me just say I appreciate the opportunity to give you an update on where we are in terms of research and economic development across the system. I want to give special recognition to each of the 4 campuses who were very responsive to our requests for information and got considerable data to us in a very timely fashion so we could put together these particular graphs and charts to let you know where we are in terms of our productivity. And you'll see throughout this that the points are illustrated by stories from each of the campuses. There were quite a few more stories to actually tell, but I just illustrated these with just a few very specific stories of recent successes on the campuses. Let me just remind you that discovering, disseminating, preserving, and applying knowledge is our mission in the research arena. And like most institutions around the country, Given the shortage of federal research dollars, many institutions are turning towards more innovation, entrepreneurial types of activities to help build substantial resources for their research and scholarly activities. Let me just start by giving you a snapshot of the federal research environment over the last 6 or 7 years to set the stage for some of the institutional issues that we have to face. These are data from a recent AAAS study that was reported in November of this year, and they show you some very significant issues related to federal research dollars available around the country. First, let me just point out that if you look at this graph, the starting point in 2010 is set here as 0, and you'll notice that no matter what federal agency I'm talking about, none of these federal agencies have gotten back to the level of funding that we enjoyed in 2010. Just to put that into perspective, then there are very few research dollars available now relative to 2010, although some of the particular institutions are beginning to recover somewhat. If you can look through the lines on this particular graph, you can see that NIH over the last couple of years has enjoyed a significant recovery since their low point in about 2013. And they're set in this current budget to be plussed up another $2 billion. Both NIH, both the House and the Senate versions of the bill include a significant plus up for NIH. And obviously DOD is another federal agency where we're seeing a significant increase in the available dollars. NSF, on the other hand, and NSF is a strong supporter of research going on several of our campuses. NSF is not faring so well in the federal budgets and is also not scheduled to see any increases in the next budgets coming along. So bottom line, less dollars available on the federal level. And in many of these agencies, the dollars are more targeted than they have been in the past. There's just 2 slides here that just give you a brief snapshot of 2 different subcommittees, Labor HHS, that controls the NIH budget. The House version of this bill is a 3.2% increase this year. The Senate version is a 5.6% increase. Senator Blunt has been a strong supporter of NIH over the last several years and will push very hard for that $2 billion increase in the budget. There are some specific one specific point I want to make in this particular slide, and that is that the NIH budget this year includes what is known as the 21st Century Cures program. 21st Century Cures was previously called precision medicine. And so the important point about that is, as you remember from the last board meeting, we talked about the top capital project across the system being the Translational Precision Medicine Building. This fits very well with what the federal emphasis is from NIH about where to spend those monies. There's another point on this slide under others that NIH will be spending, and the federal government will be spending quite a bit of money on the opioid problem. We are working very closely with our state government to put together a team that's going to study the opioid problem in Missouri and devise a strategy to tackle that problem going forward. The next slide is commerce, justice, and science. The key point around here is that NSF, as I said, is cut by 2% in both, so less money available for basic science funded by NSF. That affects our plant scientists significantly across the system, as well as a lot of other basic environmental and ecological science that goes on. All right, so let's switch now to looking at the university as in light of this background. The data I'm going to present here is really represent a 5-year window across the system. I'll talk specifically about some of each of the campuses as I go along. You can see here, this is the 5-year view of the entire system, sponsored activity. You notice that in the last 5 years, the highest level of sponsored activity on all our campuses was in 2013, FY 2013. It dropped for the next 2 years across the entire system. I'll show you some specific data related to that and give you some indication of why that happened. It is now recovering. The last 2 years have been positive. The positive upswing is rather limited at this point in time. Some of the programs that we're going to talk about going forward will have to have a much greater impact on the increases. Yes, Daryl. So sponsored activities are funding that we get external to the university. So whether it comes from the federal government or it comes from industry or it comes from the state government, so that's sponsored activities. Okay? Not any internal money that we spend on research to build infrastructure and so on and so forth. Okay? Although some of the data I'll show you on later on is NSF HERD data, and that does include some internal funding. We separate out the external and the internal in those reports. All right, so this graph, which is probably hard to see on the screens, but you have it in front of you, shows the total expenditure dollars of each of the institutions graphically represented. Let me just make a couple of points about this. There are 2 institutions that showed significant decreases after 2013, and that went into giving you the overall picture of the system. So MU showed a significant decrease after 2013, and that had to do with the cessation of several federal programs that were part of the stimulus package. So all of those programs went down in 2013 and 2014. We had some significant stimulus money on the MU campus, and so that essentially reset the baseline, if you will. And what you can see since 2013 is that we have made a slight improvement in our overall federal expenditures. The UMSL campus also saw a significant decrease. That really was an accounting issue with the Missouri Institute of Mental Health, which was counted entirely as a research expenditure, and then that accounting was changed after 2014 or so, between 2014 and 2015. And so part of MIMH is considered other and not research, and so that's the reason for that decrease. Now, in order for us to increase the amount of funding that we have across the system, we got to increase our proposal rates. We have to send in more proposals in order to be able to do that. So what this graph represents is to show you the very clear connection between the amount of proposals sent in and the amount of research funding that we're able to get. All right. So again, I'll use MU as an example. So if you look in FY15 for MU, you see a significant increase in the number of proposals that were sent in. That was followed a year later by a corresponding increase in the amount of research awards that came to MU. So there's a direct correlation a year later, since it takes about 9 to 12 months for proposals to be reviewed at the federal level, between the amount of the number of proposals that go in and the amount of awards that we receive. That's very important. We have to continue to increase the number of awards that the faculty are submitting. Their success rates are relatively similar. And our success rates relative to our peers in the AAU are relatively similar. So again, it's a matter of stimulating faculty to get the proposals put together and submitted, and to create the right kind of infrastructure like grant writers and so on that allow them to get this done.
Mark, that's obviously an item of great urgency right now. What kind of responses are you getting to your efforts to significantly increase this proposal rate?
It is improving, but we have to have more support. We have to have more support at the campus levels for faculty to get grants out the door. It's incumbent upon the research infrastructure to make sure that faculty have the kind of support structures they need. We're talking really, for us to make a big difference, I mentioned the point that our success rates are relatively similar to some of our peers across the country. But the real difference between the awards that we're winning and the awards that some of our peers are winning is in the number of dollars per award. So many of our peer institutions are going for much bigger types of awards, center grants and program project grants and big training grants and so on. We don't have a strong history of getting those kinds of awards. Just to give you an example, it would take 5 individual research grants to be equivalent to a single major program project grant or center grant that we could win. Those grants are in the $20 to $30 million range as opposed to the $2 to $3 million range. So that's why we have to put together a stronger infrastructure to be able to bring our faculty together across all 4 campuses. The other issue is that with the decrease in faculty, tenure track faculty that Dr. Choi has shown you over the last 6 months to 9 months that it's happened across the campus, we've got to do a better job of connecting our faculty across the campuses to build these kinds of research centers and research programs. All right? We have expertise on multiple campuses that if we pull it together, will be much more competitive for those kinds of awards than if we work as individual campuses.
This has to be one of our most urgent needs right now.
Absolutely, without any question.
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Sure.
I assume what you're talking about is infrastructure like the TPMC.
The TPMC, the reason why the TPMC makes a big difference is because it allows you to really recruit the best faculty that are out there and bring them onto campus. Again, if I use MU as an example, the last major research building that we built was the Life Sciences Center. Subsequent to building the Life Sciences Center, our ability to recruit really top-tier scientists went up dramatically, and our output went up dramatically. So the TPMC is really a central foundational piece to us being able to increase our research output.
In addition to that, though, is there anything that we need to be doing or that we can do or that we should be doing to incentivize the current faculty?
So faculty incentives are really very interesting. First of all, we need to pay them better than we're paying them. Our salaries are significantly below a lot of our peers. Assuming that we can fix that problem, and even fixing that problem, the faculty really will work very strategically towards improving the environment themselves if we can give them a support structure that will help them. So if we can give them grant writers, if we can give them the right kinds of technologies, they will, that's the kind of incentives that really drives them forward.
Have you put together a budget on what that infrastructure would look like and what that would cost?
Well, so just the grant writing infrastructure is basically employing key personnel, 4 to 5 probably key personnel. 4 to 5 key personnel across the entire system that have that kind of expertise. The technology budgets are significantly higher than that, obviously. TPMC itself is $200 million. The kinds of technologies that we're talking about putting into TPMC are tens of millions of dollars. So these are not targets that we're going to get to without some significant reconsideration of how we invest the resources that we have, and bringing in new resources, hopefully through things like innovation and entrepreneurship. So,
Phil, there was a comment from Barbara Bickelmeyer.
I'd just like to add on that. I think the opportunity for organization, we're already engaged in conversations about how we create the infrastructure for pre-grant and post-grant. But particularly in things like when you're talking about bringing faculty in, in health sciences and basic sciences, the startup packages that you need to bring faculty in are also critically important to consider, and those are one-time funds, but right now, for example, in pharmacy, to be competitive, it's $1 million startup package along with the salary.
Yeah, and in fact, in most of the STEM disciplines, that's the number. So if you consider any of the STEM-based life sciences areas, especially health-related, it's about $1 million to bring in any faculty. And if they are already successful faculty in the middle of their career, it's $2 million per faculty member, plus salary.
Does the system office provide any aid or any program to the campuses to help with those startup costs?
No, the system office historically has not been involved in startup costs on the individual campuses.
I'm just throwing this out for a question, not that I even have an answer. Is that something that we should consider?
Well, it would be a significant set of resources that would be required.
The system should be available to make those types of investments. The Advanced Construction Materials Laboratory, the support from the system was actually a startup to attract a new dean to Missouri S&T. So we have to be ready when those opportunities come up. But it's really incumbent upon the campuses to allocate their resources for the startup. But there are cases in which significant support is needed. We should be ready to support that.
Curator Burnsick was just stated, so I'm really just copying her, a comment on development and philanthropy. And does that play a role? And are we doing that aggressively enough for this particular area?
I think if we look around the room and see the chancellors, I think they'll say that we can do more, especially on professorships and especially on areas that support the physical infrastructure for research. Barb, you had a comment?
I think we are exploring every option we can. Generally, though, when you look at what research tells us about philanthropy, the things that donors most want to give their money to are buildings and scholarships. So it's a concerted effort to actually help them understand why faculty salaries matter, and particularly startups. But generally, they're maybe third or fourth because it's a programming aspect and a personnel aspect. So, but I think that's one opportunity where when you take something like precision medicine or translational medicine and say, we have a grand challenge and we want everybody to come around the grand challenge, we have much greater opportunity.
If I could just make one other observation, and it's a question and a comment to be discussed at a different point, but I'm wondering if we should have more of a board role in either monitoring or helping or overseeing the development and advancement university-wide.
Let's continue that discussion. Let's continue that discussion. But the chancellors, I think, are developing very high priorities that are very important to support research and supporting student success. And I think those two are the highest priorities. But to give encouragement and support for the chancellors and the campuses to focus on those key deliverables, I think will be key for us.
Yeah, and Curator Steelman, I'd like to point out that over the last 6 months or so, there's been a much closer relationship between our development officers and the research and economic development engines on our campuses, to where development is really becoming engaged with research and economic development offices to understand where the research priorities are, and then to look at their development plans toward those same sets of objectives. Whereas we generically we're soliciting philanthropy in the past, we now have that much more targeted.
No, and let me say I appreciate that. One more comment on this is that, and this is getting to Barb's comments, obviously it tends to be easier to get buildings built, but and you're the expert, and you all are the experts, but my review of the truly successful institutions is that they are not as dependent. They use the excellence of their programs and can raise money for endowed professorships, startups, and that we frankly need to step up our game in that area.
I agree.
Well, I have a question for you.
Sure.
So what we've been talking about has to do with largely with people, attracting and retaining those who have research capabilities or books of research that they can bring with them or keep at our university. But it seems that at least in medicine, precision, translational, but also in some other disciplines, I'm sure that being able to analyze big data is also very competitive.
It's very competitive.
And my question of you is, how are we fixed in terms of crunching big data, analytics? I have raised the issue of whether we need a digital data chief or whatever, because it's a different skill and it's different hardware, and it's a huge expenditure to be competitive in that area.
Yeah.
Are we where we should be in terms of making that available for the researchers that we're able to keep or attract, or do we need to make an investment in that? And I think it's different than IT, and it can be used not only for research but also for internal analysis of recruitment, retention, achievement, and so forth. Where are we on that?
Yeah, so you've hit it right on the nose. So big data is really important to everything that we want to do in any of the STEM-related disciplines. So engineering, medicine, vet medicine, translational precision medicine, big data is the key. And so how are we? Well, we have isolated pockets of excellence. So for example, the Tiger Institute in partnership with Cerner at the MU Health Complex is starting to grow a significant community of big data analytics going on. Engineering on both the UMKC and S&T campus and MU campus have all identified big data analytics as a target for recruitment going forward. Do we have a critical mass of big data support around the campuses? No, we don't. Another programming key to the translational precision medicine building, as an example, is to integrate 1/4 of the faculty that go into that building will be big data informatics types of folks. So it is the area that we have to invest pretty strongly in.
Should that be invested in silos by campus, or
no,
is that an area where we can do it and make it available to the system?
Nested in silos.
Not the system, the one university.
It should be integrated across all aspects of what we do on all 4 campuses.
Thank you.
All right, so there's a couple of more just data slides that I'm just going to skip over to get to the economic development piece of this. I'll just make a point that the next whole section of this had to do with showing comparisons, the last 5-year research expenditures and comparisons with peer groups. And there are peer groups that were identified by each of the 4 campuses. You can look at all those data yourself.
But the bottom line of those data charts show that we have a lot of work to do. We have a lot of work to do in research.
They absolutely do. And there are some important take-home messages from each of those charts. So I encourage you to take a look at those. And if you have any specific questions, send them to me. It's very important. I also punctuated those data charts with a research story from each of the campuses. These are some recent successes that the chancellors and vice chancellors for research have shared with the system as a whole. So those are nice stories for you to look at when you get the chance. But I'm going to go ahead and jump ahead to a discussion of discovery, innovation, commercialization, which is several slides downstream. All right. So I showed you the federal funding picture over the last several years in the early part of the presentation, and so this is a trend that has affected virtually all research institutions around the country. And so how are the institutions making up for it? What you see is a corresponding significant increase on all of these campuses in innovation and entrepreneurial activities. And in fact, the amount of licensing revenue that's now coming to these highly active research institutions is filling a big gap that used to be there from the federal government. So we have to be just as productive and just as focused on those kinds of activities going forward. This particular slide shows you our technology transfer cumulative data across the system for the last 5 years. You can see that if we start down the clockwise side of the chart, 893 invention disclosures filed in that period of time, 729 patent applications, 215 actual issued patents, 310 license and option agreements executed, and the result of that's $50.9 million across the system in gross licensing income. All right, so that's a reasonable start. It's a significant start, but again, just like Dr. Choi said in the research piece, this is just the tip of the iceberg, something that we have to continuously grow going forward. The next slide shows you the FY 2017 licensing income across the system, and a total of about $8 million. The next slide shows you the performance of all of our institutions from 2012 to 2017. I'll just make a couple of key points about this. The big drop at MU in 2017 has to do with the fact that one of our major patents went offline. The patent for Zegrid, which was bringing us tens of millions of dollars, has now gone offline, and so we have to have replacement technologies for that kind of income going forward. There's a significant increase in UMKC's FY17 revenues, and that was due to the licensing of the technology called iVerify. So that just gives you a snapshot of each of the campuses over the last several years in terms of licensing income. This will be a big thrust across the system going forward, and something that we're going to put a lot of energy and effort into. We have reached out to each of the campuses to begin to first inventory the amount of technology that are the efforts that are going on each of the campuses towards this technology, innovation, and entrepreneurship, and that will become a focus as we go forward. We have a lot of talent across our 4 campuses that if we can tie together into an integrated system, we can make technology management much more effective for our students, for our faculty and staff and students. This slide talks about what the ecosystem is going to look like. I apologize first for this slide because this was the design slide, and I did not catch the fact that this was the design slide and not the final version of the slide. For those of you who still read Latin, you'll notice that none of the words under each of those figures has anything to do with the figures. For those of you who still read Latin, my question is why? Nonetheless, I apologize. What should be under each of these figures is a description of the ongoing efforts that are going to happen over the next 6 months across the system so that we can build an ecosystem of innovation and entrepreneurship. And this means cross-training across the campuses, and we have some great programs on the UMSL campus, UMSL Accelerate, led by Charlie Hoffman and Dan Lauer. We have a terrific community engagement program at UMKC led by Maria Myers. So we have a lot of resources across our campuses that we're going to try to pull together into an ecosystem so that we can market innovations from the university no matter where they come from across the entire state of Missouri. And the other aspect of this is that we have built now a linkage between our campuses and the statewide business engagement and extension programs in order to be able to market our technologies across the entire state as a whole.
Mark, thank you for that. Quick question about putting together this ecosystem that you just talked about and linking all the campuses together, cross-functional teams. What's your time frame on that, on getting that going, or timeline to completion?
So we have a meeting coming up later this month that includes all 4 campuses and some external state stakeholders, where we're going to sit down and talk about the inventory of things that we have already, and how to take advantage of all of those capabilities across the system to build this ecosystem. So hopefully by the end of this calendar year, we will begin to see what that ecosystem is going to look like. There are some significant problems that we have to tackle in terms of our technology management processes, and part of that will be an analysis of the processes themselves, and part of that will be an analysis of the personnel and whether or not we have the most effective personnel in terms of technology management. The third bucket that you see on that slide has to do with the business engagement piece. Our urban campuses have already really begun to develop a pretty nice business engagement part of their ecosystems. We want to try to harness all of that capability into a single thing. How long is it going to take? I would hope by 6 months out, we have a pretty strong structure put in place. Getting all the right personnel into that structure will take a collaboration among all 4 campuses to make sure we get it done.
Another question?
Sure.
The first graph that you showed us was an analysis of the federal spend and how variable it is.
Yes.
And political winds change.
Right.
Do we, and does our faculty focus on the likelihood of funding during, it varies, depending on who the administration is. So I see that the Department of Defense is up. Some of the other areas are down and probably will be down. So do we pay attention to that? And for example, we could expect Department of Defense to increase, and some of that is even medical. So
yeah,
we can be focusing on that.
We pay very close attention to that. And not only that, we have engaged now a federal relations group, Clark Hill, who is also well connected across the defense industry in particular. I just sent out a message to the chancellors this week to get them to begin to look through their campus portfolios for areas where we can get engagement of Clark Hill with contacts at federal agencies in order to try to help some of those programs get into the federal budgeting process as we go along. So yes, we pay very close attention to the fact that NIH and precision medicine is a very significant target going forward. DOD is a significant target going forward. NASA is still doing pretty well in the federal budget going forward. So all of those are indicators to our faculty of where they might have the best success in research funding.
So we've always been focused on AAU standing and research being a component that we're in jeopardy on that. To what extent are we able to piggyback on to private foundations or even the Cerners of the world and collaborate on research where it isn't necessarily our big data analysis, but we could use theirs, but we're not accounting for it in our spend, but we're able to do publications and juried research based on that collaboration. How do we how do we leverage that? Because we have lots of opportunities. You know, MRI Global and Cerner and maybe in the future Stowers.
Right. Well, so we're working very strongly on trying to leverage that at this point in time. So you've already mentioned Cerner. Roche is now coming because of the Cerner relationship. Roche is now into the picture. They are interested in investing significantly in big data analytics related to the electronic health record. We've had conversations over the last week with Bayer Monsanto, with Boeing, with other groups around to engage them in that very process. I also want to point out that there are some industry grants and contracts that also count toward AAU metrics. So some of the industry investment in universities is still an AAU. It can be an AAU indicator under certain sets of circumstances. So we pay very close attention to that. We're in fact trying to educate our faculty now about what those indicators are, including if they have a great story to tell, like some of the ones that are illustrated here, they need to be trying to tell it in some of the top journals in the country, rather than going to some mid-level journal, which they've had a lot of success with in the past. Why not tell this story in a journal that's at one of the highest tiers? That's a very significant metric for the AAU.
Mark?
Yeah.
If I could just add one point on the question about big data and Cerner. UMKC has something called Health Facts Boot Camp, which we deliver not only to Kansas, any researcher who's interested. We have researchers coming from all over the country. We have access to Cerner's data, and actually Cerner and Children's Mercy Hospital data, and basically we teach them how to use that data to address questions that they can derive from that. So there's lots of opportunity there.
Chancellor Cartwright, you have a question?
I was just going to comment also. It should be clear, made clear that, you know, at Mizzou we do have quite a bit of capability in the data analysis and data analytics, and there are faculty who are being sought after to work with industry. So I think those connections can happen, and you can think about how to leverage the public-private partnerships in ways that we probably haven't in the past. So any of the working with foundations, Stowers, others, I think all of those are things we're really interested in, and they've been a priority that I've put in place for sure, is that we're going to go aggressively after public-private, we're going aggressively after large center-type grants at NSF and at other places, because I believe that we should focus on those, because one of the interesting things about winning a large center grant is the ripple effect that happens in that you get that big center grant, but then you also get a lot of other grants that come along with it, because you've now been recognized as a point of excellence in that area. So we will be targeting large grants and pretty aggressively.
Are there any other questions of Dr. McIntosh? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Appreciate it. Mr. Chairman, our second information item is really an annual report on the Inter-Campus Faculty Council. And of course, we had a luncheon today with that council. I think it was very beneficial. And that, as a result of a couple of years ago, we decided we were going to have at least 2 meetings a year with that council. And earlier this year, John Phillips and I in the spring met with them, and then later on in September, John Sunvold joined me in Boonville, and we had a great conference down there, and Dr. Choi was a part of that as well. Some of the items that they pointed out at that meeting, Susan Brownell was the chair at the time, and she highlighted the fact that the faculty had conducted a standard and post-tenure review change to CRRs. And we noted that this was faculty-driven. It wasn't driven by the curators, and it took a tremendous amount of time, and we now have one of the most comprehensive systems in the whole country as a result of that. Again, IFC did it, not the board or anyone within the university system. There were a lot of questions with regard to how we interact and what we can do to improve our relationships, and certainly they were all interested in compensation for teachers and faculty. And we pointed out that, we knew they hadn't had raises in many years, but we were working towards trying to increase compensation for some of those quality teachers. And some of the other things we talked about were private gifts, reaching out, research dollars, which we've just now talked about a lot, and we need to do a lot more in absence of legislative support. We pointed out to the members that, we are not trying to micromanage the administration or Dr. Choi. We're more or less hoping to step back and be cheerleaders rather than trying to meddle in their affairs, but certainly we want to be involved. We also pointed out, I think, both cases that we felt like with the new leadership in place, that we were going in the right direction and that the board was going to be very supportive of what we're trying to do. Let's see what we got here. As a closing item, they wanted to know other ways in which they could be involved with the curators. And out of that came this luncheon today. And I think everybody felt like we had a really good discussion and got to know them better. They got to know us better, and I think appreciate a little more what the Board of Curators does. So all in all, if any, that's pretty much the report. Are there any questions with regard to that? All right, seeing none, we're going to move on to the action items. And we have 3 action items today. We have a bachelor's degree at UMSL in International Relations, a bachelor's degree in Biomedical Engineering, and master's degree in Care Management, both from Mizzou. And I would like to invite Dr. Graham to the podium to present those to the board.
Good afternoon. Just some comments about the 3 degrees in front of you today. I think that what you'll see are these are programs that are geared more towards student needs. I think the word has gone out for us to be innovative and to try to build programs that don't require new resources. I know years ago, I recall standing up here and we would put programs in front of the board that required some additional faculty or additional resources. And I don't think that's the case these days. I think they're very modest, if any new resources needed. But they're programs that are geared to attract new students to the campus and also to serve the needs of students as the changing needs in society. So with that kind of as a backdrop, let me just start with the bachelor's degree in international relations. Essentially, this is a program that has been embedded in the political science department at UMSL. The coursework is already there, but they've never offered a freestanding degree in international relations. And as you know, we see the changes in the global environment, particularly in this region, so there are a number of people that could be attracted to a focused degree on international relations. It has to do with military, which they're trying to do a lot, from their work with Veterans Affairs programs, employers in the region. So a lot of people have reached out to them, and so they have basically built a program that uses existing faculty and existing courses to create a new standalone degree that should have more market appeal. It's one that they think will have a fairly modest impact and bring new students into the campus, and within a few years should be fairly vibrant. So I'll pause and see if there are any particular questions about that one. Do you want to do the votes one at a time?
If there are no questions, may I have a motion and a second from the committee to recommend to the full board to approve the new degree program, Bachelor of Arts in International Relations at UMSL?
So moved.
I'll second the motion.
Second. Any other discussion? All in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed, nay. Any abstentions? Mr. Chairman, I'd move to approve the new degree program, Bachelor of Arts International Relations, UMSL, as presented.
Is there a second? Do we have a second from the board?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Nay? No abstentions? Motion carried. would the next, would you want to make the next motion to cover both 2 and 3? To cover both of the 2 degrees?
You want to do it at the same time?
I think we can.
If there's no objection from your committee, you can take them up at the same time.
We'll let Dr. Graham then explain both of them and then have the
Yes.
vote subsequent to that.
Absolutely.
Steve?
I'll be quick then. It sounds, this next one is sort of in the biomedical engineering program in the College of Engineering at MU. Dr. McIntosh did a perfect setup for this because this is the kind of program that will be connected to the TPMC. I think you're going to see the Mizzou Engineering School go heavy into biomedical engineering, and so this is the first step. We'll probably see master's and PhD programs. They have plans with the new dean to really focus on this area. Once again, this is a program that has really been offered, but it's been offered under the auspices of the biological engineering, and with changing accreditation standards, they really feel that a degree program that's ABET accredited in biomedical engineering is really a better fit. Will attract more students, and it's kind of the hot new field, if you will, and hopefully will attract more scholars and researchers as well as students in that space. I'll pause and see if you have any questions about that. We heard.
When do you start these programs? When do these launch?
Typically, after they're approved by our board, then they go through the CBHE cycle, the Coordinating Board of Higher Education, and so that usually takes somewhere between 2 or 3 months, and as soon as those are approved by that board, then they're available to be offered. So most of these should be available for fall. So, okay. All right, the next program is a Master's in Science and Care Management.
Quick question. Sorry about that. Didn't mean to interrupt you. But before, when we get a new degree program such as these, is there a certain amount of demand that you look at, or are there a certain number of students you're looking for? It's a master's degree, for 2 of them. How many students have to be enrolled in it to make it viable?
No, that's a very good question. It kind of depends on each program in terms of what the demand is. As you can see, it varies by program. Usually we're looking at something that's going to bring in at a minimum to 10, 20 new students. Some of these programs have all the existing faculty and courses that are required, so that we're not looking at it to be that strident. It's actually hard to predict. I recall probably one of the best and exciting things, but yet the worst prediction with the Bachelor of Health Sciences, we predicted 200 students, and they're at almost 2,000 at Mizzou. So it's kind of hard to tell until they get it ramped up. But so we're looking for at least probably 10 to 12 graduates a year would be, so like 40 or 50 students in the program. Master's programs, less. As you can see, probably 40 or 50 students. Okay. The Master's of Science and Care Management is a new twist for the College of Nursing, and once again, they're trying to be relatively innovative with this. This is a program that will be delivered online, fully online, to make it available. And what they're finding in the nursing profession is that there are a lot of things that are going on in the healthcare industry where you really need someone that's a traffic cop or a manager for managing all the different professions, and to treat some of these chronic and long-term diseases or substance abuse. So this is a program that they will offer for care managers. There's a need for those as like at Tiger Place and places like that. They built this with the assistance of an advisory group. Once again, one part-time faculty who will be doing some teaching in other areas. They should break even in a year or two. An interesting thing that I just found out is what they're really excited about is once they get this up and running, and with our focus on collaborating with community colleges, there's some interest in taking this master's program and designing it such a fashion so that it could be an RN to MS program, which is exactly the kinds of things that we're looking for. So I think word's going out that we want to work with community colleges, we want to put things online, and we need to be real efficient in terms of how we design the program. So once again, kind of an interesting twist and something that can expand on what the nursing school offers. Okay. Any questions related to that?
Any further questions?
I guess I have one more question, Vice Chancellor Graham. Thank you. You spoke on one thing. You said this will break even in a year and a half. So part of, I know we approved the first action item, but of all 3 of these degrees, do you pro forma out how you feel like their financial performance is going to be and what their break-even cost per credited hour is, or how that works?
We do that, and you can see, and each of the campuses too will run these through that their CFO or the budget office on the campus to make sure that those numbers, we sort of check them generally. This one, as you mentioned, is sort of the first year or two, and the dean of the School of Nursing has agreed to pick up that cost for the first couple of years. The other ones, really, there's not much additional cost at all. But you're right, we do run, and you can see, for example, in this one, there's quite a bit of detail in the back here that costed out by student and stuff like that. So, yeah. So Rhonda's office, Rhonda Gibler's office, and Todd Mackley will scrub them before they come.
Quick question. We are sometimes presented with new degrees and programs, but I don't recall seeing in our agendas when we are eliminating programs. Does that get reported to us? Am I just missing it?
No, typically when a degree program is eliminated, it goes into an inactive status to allow those students that are enrolled in the program to to finish out, and so that's done internally. So we do that scrubbing internally and move it out. But that's a really good question to ask because I think right now we're going through, under the guidance of Dr. Choi and all the campus chancellors, we're looking at all of our academic programs to try to see what can be consolidated, what can be added or combined. And so I think that you'll see those coming to those kinds of, you'll hear about those as the campuses try to collapse or eliminate programs. And you should be prepared to support the campuses when they come forward with those. Now, in the past, we haven't brought a large group of those. We just take them off the books. But I don't know, we could look at that in the future as to whether or not you'd like a report out.
I know sometimes it's controversial. On the other hand, we are under public scrutiny, and they don't want us to have duplication.
Yep.
And if we're always adding programs, they may have the misimpression that we're not constantly reviewing our offerings.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I wanted to add too, our bylaws actually speak directly to that. And I think we may review and approve proposed changes in the university's academic programs and other major enterprises and so on. So it makes sense that if we're going to look at program additions, it would be nice to get some deletions as well so that we can take a look at them. We can put them on the consent agenda if we like and just, blow through them, or we can actually discuss them and get some reasons if it's something that is important to carry out our mission or our long-term strategy as a university, or as a system. So I guess that the board's got to decide what it wants to do, but it's in our bylaws that we can do it. I think we've talked about this before.
So
other programs.
This came up as part of the discussion on ag journalism, and over the coming year, the chancellors are all working with their campuses as part of their strategic plan and the academic portfolio review. And we do estimate that there will be programs that will be eliminated. Some of them eliminated based on just simple numbers. How many graduates are being produced? Are we meeting the Missouri Department of Higher Ed requirements? For others, we may just be asking ourselves, is the quality of the program sufficient that we should maintain them? So there's going to be different compelling justification, but we're going through that process now. And we discussed last time as part of ag journalism that we will bring it to the board for its consideration. But I just want to share with you that there's a lot of hard work that goes in to identifying these programs that are going to be eliminated. And there's also campus input into that process too, the stakeholders, to see who's going to be affected. But I think it's going to be a very careful exercise that we're going to be pursuing as part of the portfolio review, and we'll bring that up to the board.
I think it'd be the consensus of the board that we'd like to see both programs that are added and programs that are to be discontinued. It could be that they even are on a consent agenda, and then if one of us as a curator sees one we want to pull out and talk about, we could do that. But I think there would be a consensus among the board that we'd like to see new and those being discontinued.
Okay. Seems fair enough.
Any further discussion? If not, may I have a motion and a second from the committee to approve these two new programs, 2 new degrees?
So make a motion to approve 2 new programs, these 2.
All in favor? We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. All those in abstention? The vote is passed. And Mr. Chairman, I now move to approve the new degrees of Bachelor of Arts in Biomedical Engineering at MU and MS Care Management at MU.
Motion? And we have a second. I have a second to the motion. The motion is to add those two new degree programs at MU, Masters of Science in Biomedical Engineering and a Masters of Science in Care Management. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. No abstentions, motion carried.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, that concludes the business of the Academic Student and External Affairs Committee. Is there a motion?
Steve, thank you.
Is there a motion to adjourn the committee?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Been moved and seconded. The committee be adjourned. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Any abstentions? Committee is adjourned.
Next on the agenda, and we're a little bit ahead of time, would you all take a 5 or 10 minute break, or? Let's take a 5 or 10 minute break.
5 more.
10.
10. 10 minutes.
We're back into public session, and the next item on the agenda is the report of the Compensation and Human Resources Committee. And Chairman Lehman, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Compensation and HR Committee has 2 action items today. And before I ask Marcia Fisher to present on the first item, I want to provide a little bit of background on the recently formed Compensation Work Group. The Compensation Work Group has been created to help guide the university forward to ensure we have market competitive pay programs that will allow us to continue to attract and retain highly qualified faculty and staff. Members of this work group will be made up of campus and HR leaders, as well as members from our Board of Curators. I want to thank Curator Burnsick and Curator Chapman for agreeing to participate in this important work. This is something that, as the chairman of this committee and as a new curator, we've had a lot of conversations about compensation comparators. We want to get it right. It's very important. And so this group will, I think, focus on that and do very well. I'd like to ask Marcia to present on action item number 1, which will provide new and improved benefits for benefit-eligible faculty and staff.
Thank you. So one of the things I enjoy most in my role as interim system HR and as my previous role in the General Counsel's office is that I have the opportunity to interact with employees on all the campuses, at the hospital, at the system level, and just really in a variety of areas at the university. And I'll share an observation with you that there's a common thread that runs through this varied background of employees. The varied background includes folks that have worked here for decades or folks that are new to the university. Some have been worked and lived in Missouri for their life. Others moved specifically to Missouri just for the University of Missouri. And some are entry-level employees, and some have truly reached the top of their field. So what's this common thread? It really is the commitment to the University of Missouri, the commitment to our students, the commitment to our patients, and to the Missourians that we serve. In times of transition and reduced resources, this commitment has really shined in the efforts and the time that they've put to support our mission. And I am thankful to be able to serve them in this role, and I'm thankful to serve leaders who support them in their work and who value them. And so I think this is a great way for us to say, you're heard, you're seen, and we're listening. So the 3 CRRs that we're bringing to you today will both help with recruitment of faculty and staff and some eligible students, as well as they'll help with work-life balance, and they'll create some common practices across the campuses. Another guiding principle when we were deciding what to bring forth today was being good stewards of our resources. So with that, our first is the winter break reduced operations. Winter break reduced operations allows each campus and the system office to operate under a reduced operation plan for the period of time between the Christmas holiday and New Year's Day holiday. Historically, this has not been a consistent practice across the campuses. UMSL has for many, many years closed, and folks used vacation time or personal days. You may recall last year that the interim chancellor at MU chose to close during this time period and use administrative leave. This inconsistency across the campuses was upsetting to the campuses, and so this would help us have a consistent practice. So eligible employees who were not permitted to work during this time period will be paid. Employees who are required to work during this time period will have corresponding time off at a later date that has to be used or forfeited by November 30th of the following year. There's no increased labor cost. It will have some increased vacation liability and some loss of production, but we know this is historically a quiet time during the university, and we also know that some exempt employees will continue to work probably during this time period. Estimated cost savings in closing the 4 campuses during this time period is approximately $116,000 to $126,000 from this reduced operations. We benchmarked other higher education institutions, both from Missouri and AAU, and it's supported that many schools do close during this time period and that this is in line with other schools. Some close for a longer period of time, some use holiday or premium pay, and some do have a less period of time, but this doesn't put us at the low end and this doesn't put us in the high end. It puts us consistently. Yep. So that's winter break reduced operations. Shall I go on to the next shared leave program? The shared leave program establishes the opportunity to have a shared leave program. That's when other employees can donate their vacation time when someone's had a catastrophic event or an illness and they've used their paid leave. This is an authorizing CRR, and so a more detailed policy will be developed and approved by the president after being reviewed by the general counsel. This does set forth some key principles: that they use vacation time, that it's donated to a shared pool, and there's one shared leave program. So again, this is allowing consistency across the campuses and not having 4 separate programs. Just a little bit of history is that it's been going on for about 10 years that staff have been asking for this. And so I think it's good that they're being heard. And again, benchmarking, state of Missouri has a plan like this. Other institutions have plans like this. Cost-wise, there could be some administrative cost in administering the program, but we expect it to be minimal, that we expect to have a streamlined process for that. Finally, probably my favorite, so the reduced tuition assistance for employees for their spouse or their dependents. We provide 50%. So currently you have to have been employed at the university for 5 years to get this benefit. In doing some research, we discovered we were very much an outlier, that most schools, let's see, it's 20 out of the 21 of AAUP and 6 out of the 7 that were surveyed have 1 year or less. So we'll reduce that vesting period to 1 year to allow employees to take advantage of that benefit. And then there's 2 other improvements. One is if a student or a spouse dependent is using this benefit and the employee dies, then they're able to continue this benefit up to the program of 140 hours or no longer than 5 years after the death. And then finally, if when an employee retires, either the semester before or the semester of, if someone is using this benefit, then they're allowed to continue this for that program, again, up to the 140 credit hours or 5 years. There had been some talk about other institutions pay 100% or 75%, but we felt like at this time that this was the appropriate change to make. What questions can I answer?
Do curators qualify for that? Families? Just a question.
I'm afraid not.
You can make that happen.
Just a question. Just thinking ahead.
Any other questions? Marcia, thank you very much.
Thank you.
If there's no further discussion, may I have a motion and a second from the Compensation and HR Committee to recommend to the board approval of new collected rules and regulations, Chapter 340.045, winter break, reduced operations, new CRR, Chapter 340.055, principles for the establishment of shared leave program, and collected rules and regulation amendments 230.070, educational assistance program for the university employees other than graduate teaching and research assistants.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Please say nay. Any abstentions? Motion carries. Mr. Chairman, I move to the full board to approve the new CRs, Chapter 340.045, winter break, reduce operations, new CRRs, Chapter 340.55, principle for establishment of shared leave program and collective rules and regulations amendment 230.070, educational assistance program for university employees other than graduate teaching and research assistants.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
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 All opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carried. There will be a PR release going out on this later today. So this will be public knowledge, at least with the media tomorrow. Next, I know she's ready because I gave her a dress rehearsal earlier unintentionally.
Mr. Chairman, I've got one more.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Actually, no problem.
I'm still trying to get to Jamie so much quicker.
You are speeding this up. You're doing a great job.
We got a lot to do.
Mr. Chairman, the committee has one other item for open session, and that is to vote to go into closed session. So at this time, I will entertain a motion and a second from members of the committee to go into closed session to be held at the conclusion of tomorrow's public session. So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay.
And that
Any
does
abstentions?
That does not require
Oh, it doesn't.
board
Okay.
action.
Perfect.
As I was saying. Call upon Curator Farmer. By the way, you noticed the new configuration. The last configuration at our last meeting, we called the Jamie Farmer configuration because she recommended that and it turned out very well. And we've tweaked it just a bit and we call this the Dr. Choi configuration. He came up with this configuration with the general officers facing us, and we would appreciate any comments about the different setups we have because we want these meetings to be as productive as possible. But Jamie.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Choi, for this configuration. I'm enjoying it. And let's kick off with the Audit Committee. We have one information item, and we are going to review. Our Vice President presented the fiscal year 2017 financial status report based on the audited financial statements of the university. And Rachel Dwiggins, partner with BKD, is going to present to us the fiscal year 2017 auditor's report and required communication. So thank you.
Thank you and good afternoon. I'm happy to report the results of the 2017 external audit report. These are kind of the things that we're going to highlight today. First of which is, so we have to adhere to a couple different sets of auditing standards, as well as the system has to adhere to certain financial reporting standards. And we've listed those there for you so you know what those standards are, but I'm not going to go through them in detail. The output of our audit consists of the audit report of the system as a whole, as well as a separately issued audit on Capital Region Medical Center. You should have also received our report to the Board of Curators and the Audit Committee, and I'll hit the highlights of that report as well. The objective of the external audit is really for us to express an opinion on whether those financial statements are materially correct in accordance with the required standards. And I'm happy to report today that in both cases, both of those audit reports did receive an unmodified opinion, which is the highest level of opinion that you can receive on the financial statements. So that is good news. The second thing I want to touch on is during the planning phase of the audit, we had communicated certain areas that we were going to focus particular attention on, areas that are inherently subject to higher risk. So to circle back around on those areas at the conclusion of the audit, we've listed those there, and you can see that there were no matters to report with respect to any of those areas. We are also required to let you know that there are certain numbers in the financial statements that do involve an estimate process. Those are listed there for you. As a part of our audit procedures, we are looking at each of those estimates to make sure that they are reasonable and that the resulting figures are reasonably correct. Also want to let you know that in footnote 1 of the audit report itself, that's where you can find the narrative of all the significant accounting policies that are followed by the system. There were 2 new standards that were required to be adopted for fiscal year 17, and we have listed those there for you. The first is GASB 74, which is related to other post-employment benefit plans, and really just added some additional disclosures in the footnotes to the financial statements. And I'll talk a little bit in a second about GASB 75, which is the sister standard to 74. The other standard that was required to be adopted was GASB 80. And what this standard did is it redefined what component units are required to be presented under a discrete method versus blended. And this did change the appearance of your financials in that there used to be, for fiscal year 16 and prior, there were discretely presented component units. So there were a separate column on your financials. Those were now required to be blended and are presented in the same columns as the system themselves. I'm also happy to report that there were no audit adjustments that were required to be recorded. So what this tells you as a governing body is that management is quite prepared when we go through the audit process, and we're not having to come in and clean up a bunch of things with respect to the financial statements and have them record a bunch of journal entries there. Before I get into the other matters, one thing I did want to point out is that in that required communication document, if we were to have found any material weaknesses or significant deficiencies in internal control with respect to the financial statements, those would have been communicated to you in that document. You did not see that section because we did not find any of those to report to you. So again, that's good news that you did not see that in that document. I mentioned GASB 75. This is a new standard that will be required to be adopted in fiscal year 18 and is with respect to post-employment benefits, which will be an increase in a liability on the face of the financials. And I know this has all been communicated previously to you, but we've been communicating with management as well, and they're well prepared for the implementation of that new standard. Other deliverables, so there are a couple of other pieces that we do. One is some required agreed upon procedures with respect to which are required by NCAA. Those are in process right now and will be issued right after the first of the year, as well as the compliance piece of the audit, which is related to all of the federal funds in which the system participates, and that is in process as we speak as well. Are there any questions on either the audit report, the report to those charged with governance, or really just the audit process in general?
Do we have any questions? Rachel, thank you so much for your work with BKD. And Michelle and Ryan, thank you very much for all the work you put together. It's very nice to have a good audit report. Makes this job easy. So this concludes the business of the audit committee. Is there a motion to adjourn the audit committee?
So moved.
And a second? Okay. Chairman, or do I need a vote? All in favor of adjourning, say aye.
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 Opposed? Nay? Abstentions? Okay, so Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to conclude the audit committee. Did I miss something?
No need to move.
Okay.
You're just going to quit on your own.
I'm sober.
Jamie, it was worth waiting for.
Yes, thank you.
Next on the agenda is the Health Affairs Committee, and I will turn it over to Curator Phillips.
I'm glad that audit finished a little early. That gives us a little more time. And Jonathan Curtright is joining us to give a report from MU Health. Before he begins, I'd like to give a little preface because we're at a pivotal point at MU Health and with the medical school. We had a couple meetings last week. One was the advisory council to MU Health, which includes folks from the School of Nursing, health professions, and of course the medical school. And it went very well. I think, and we also have community members on that council. And I would say that this is the healthiest I've seen the relationships between those schools and MU Health since I've been on the board, which has now been 5 years. We have not replaced what used to be a vice chancellor for, I think, health services or health affairs. And in fact, President Choi and Chancellor Cartwright have been overseeing those schools in MU Health. And the relationships, I think, are better than ever. Jonathan is going to give you shortly a great report on the success of MU Health, better than I could have imagined, to tell you the truth. There are some other things. We don't have the dean here, but I do want to. Oh, he is here.
Yep.
Oh, I didn't see him. Oh, he's in the back. Very good. He's made some hires, which are going to increase the research capabilities, including bringing in some with a research portfolio. I think that's outstanding. Also, he has a science council of people that even outside the system. The two that I know that have recently been appointed include Dr. Lihen Lee, who's one of the team leaders at Stowers Institute, recently was asked to join his council, which I think is a wonderful step. He's accepted. I also recently learned that Dr. John Spurtis, who's the top researcher at UMKC School of Medicine in terms of national reputation and how prolific he is, has also been asked to join his group. So I think he's making great advances. Also want to say that the TPMC is exciting, I think, across the campuses. Obviously, it's going to be in Columbia, but the opportunities that exist on each campus to contribute to that in terms of research and join with those at MU is just really exciting for a lot of folks. And of course, the Boone County is another exciting opportunity, and we hope that that goes forward. So Jonathan is going to walk through some of the financials, some leadership changes, which I would say are improvements in terms of the staffing at MU Health, the volume indicators, talk a little bit about the Tiger Institute. So I can't say enough about, in the past we've had trouble getting information, but this past meeting we got a dashboard, we got some financials that are easy to read, and couldn't be better. So Jonathan, walk us through.
Thank you so much, Curator Phillips. And we just had our meeting last Friday, so there aren't any approved minutes yet, but we thought we could do a one-pager brief synopsis for the curators. There are several leadership changes that are in the works at MU Healthcare, and I wanted to make sure the board is aware of them. Dr. Steve Witt has accepted the position of Chief Clinical Officer, and I've highlighted that in the past, but Mary Beck is also, and she's previous faculty member in the Sinclair School of Nursing. She is our Chief Nursing Officer. And then Pam Mulholland has just accepted the position of Chief of Ambulatory Services. Ambulatory services, our outpatient practice, will be our future, and we're going to be making major investments in that going forward. We just have 3 active searches that are in place right now. As everybody knows, Brian Steinis recently left about 6 or 9 months ago, and we're working with Spencer Stewart to find a great group of quality candidates for the CFO. I'm definitely happy with the slate of candidates we have. This is very much of I think a cherished job nationally. I think some of the work we've been doing over the last decade is being known nationally, and people are excited about the idea of joining us. We're in the middle of our first round of interviews right now. We also, as many of you know, we have had an acting Chief Compliance Officer in Jennifer May, and she's been doing an outstanding job. That being said, we felt it was important that we go through a process for that position as well. And then most recently in the last week, Sue Copeful has announced that it's her intention to retire at the end of this year. But we're going to do something a little bit innovative on this one. She's going to retire on a Friday, and then she'll come back to work as kind of a consultant to the CEO or something like that, where we can, and her assignment will be to be the Chief Human Resources Officer for the next 3 or 4 months while we do a national search for that position. I think it's going to be absolutely critical that we have that position filled, especially during the potential of hard work being done with Boone Hospital. So those are some leadership changes that are out there. I feel really good about our leadership team. And people, as I said, are very much excited about the idea of joining our team. So those are leadership updates. In terms of finances year to date, our overall bottom line for net operating income is $35 million. Compared to last year, we were at $24 million. And maybe more importantly than that is I'm excited about our operating margin percentage at 11.2% versus last year at 7%, and compared to the Moody's A rated of 6%. So our overall profitability in terms of dollars is strong. It's the strongest it's been, I believe, ever, and also is also very solid in terms of actual efficiency and the overall percentage, the margin percentages that's out there. And that is translating into cash, and we've been able to increase our days cash on hand to 223 days. In the last 3 or 4 months, it's gone up from by about 10 days, and that's about $20 million that's dropped straight to that stayed within cash. And then finally, at our Health Affairs Committee, we re-reviewed the capital budget items that were reviewed with the Board of Curators at the last round. So a very good financial update. What were the key drivers on this? And I really am excited that it's not accounting, it's not changes, if you will, in the way governments are paying for, or payers are paying for healthcare. This is good old-fashioned hard work in managing the hospital and getting the volumes through that we need to. Our patient days are up nearly 6%. Our total surgeries are up 4%, and our outpatient visits, and this is what I'm most excited about, are actually up almost 5% over last year. So this is really the hard work of the nurses and the doctors and all of our staff every single day to get these patients through. Finally, and actually, Patrick, would you be willing to come up here for just a second? Yeah. Finally, I'd like to give an update on the Tiger Institute. As many of you know, Mr. Neil Patterson is an icon in our field, and he was the founder of Cerner, and he tragically passed away this last year. He is just an icon in the field, and it has always been his dream in working with the University of Missouri to build a model, the Tiger Institute, that would make it so we'd have to spend less money on healthcare and provide the best amount of services we can at the lowest possible price. And he always wanted to do that in partnership with the land-grant university that was in the home state of Cerner. And that's what became the Tiger Institute. When Mr. Patterson passed away, there was a little anxiety, if you will, on our behalf and also at Cerner as to whether or not the Tiger Institute model would continue. And I'm here to say that it is definitely in good shape. President Choi, Chancellor Cartwright, Dean Delafontaine, and I met with Zane Burke, the acting president, as well as Joanne Burns, the senior vice president for strategic planning, and Brian Bliven, and we reaffirmed our commitment to this particular model. And it is going very, very well, and frankly, it is the envy of many, many healthcare systems that Cerner works with. They get asked nearly every month for a model like this, and they say, whoa, we can't do this with everybody, but we are going to do it with the University of Missouri. So it's very much of a success in terms of clinical research and education. And then finally, I will tell you, relative to the Tiger Institute, Cap Region Medical Center, our partner in Jeff City, just announced that they will be using the Tiger Institute and the Cerner products. That is absolutely critical because patients in Cole County and around the lake will no longer have to come to Columbia to get their care, per se. They're going to be able to get their care and have it totally integrated through our electronic medical record. And I'm glad, Jamie, I'm reading your body language as a Jeff City, and this is hopefully something that will be very, very good for you and your family. So that's something we're very, very excited about. And then finally, we will be using the revenue cycle product for Cerner. That we're in the project process right now, working with Steve Owens and our other legal team to get that contract fixed. So with that, Patrick, I know there's several leadership changes. Would you like to maybe make a few comments as well?
I'll be happy to. Thanks, Jonathan. So as Jonathan just explained to you, we had, and Curator Phillips summarized nicely, we had a productive Health Affairs Committee meeting last week. We went over some of the finances of the hospital, MUHC. They're doing well. The finances really reflect, I think, the robust growth of our clinical programs. As you know, our physicians are all faculty in the School of Medicine. We've had a nice growth of our clinical faculty. We now number over 630 clinical faculty. That's not all clinical FTEs, meaning each faculty person has a percentage allocation to clinical work. And so if you look at clinical FTEs, that's a little different than number of faculty, but that's a very significant growth. We've had some significant hires at the level of departments. I think some of you know already that we've hired new chairs. In the last 2 years, we've hired new chairs of surgery, cancer center, medicine, and radiology. All of these hires are nationally and internationally known physician scientists that brought NIH funding to the university and the health system. More recently, we were pleased to hire a new chief of cardiology, Dr. Liu, who came to us from Ohio State. Dr. Liu is an electrophysiologist. This is an area of significant potential in mid-Missouri. There's very little advanced electrophysiologists, and in fact, the only advanced electrophysiologist that was recruited in the last 2 years was one of my fellows from Tulane that I had sent to Harvard to train for 2 years. Sandeep Gautam came back and has really established an advanced EP program at the university that is now, I think, really going to reap benefits. The new chief of cardiology, Dr. Liu, is not only an electrophysiologist, he comes with 2 recently awarded NIH R01 grants. So these are very high caliber recruits for the university. They're impacting the important drivers of the AAU mission. Some other relevant important hires are we have started a Center for Bioinformatics Research at the school, working in collaboration with the campus. We have a new director, Dr. Peter Tonelato, who set up the bioinformatics program at the University of Wisconsin. also was a leader for many years in the bioinformatics programs at Harvard, and in fact kept a 50% appointment at both of those institutions for the last 10 years. He was so much in demand that neither of them wanted to give him up. Well, he gave all of that up to come to the University of Missouri, and I think he will really have an impact on growing our research programs in bioinformatics, in particular working with the hospital, the Tiger Institute, and our other big data scientists on campus. I'll point out some other leadership changes too, just that will be an opportunity. We thank Dr. Fate. Dr. Fate has been our chair of pediatrics, child health, for the last 10 years. He's retiring at the end of the month. We're starting a national search for a replacement. That will be an opportunity because although Women and Children's is an excellent clinical facility, it has not had a lot of involvement in research through the years, and I think this is an opportunity to get another physician scientist of national caliber that will come, grow our clinical programs, and also grow our research programs. If you look at our health system as compared to higher performing health systems, and when we've done our internal comparisons, we've taken as good models Chapel Hill, University of Iowa, University of Michigan, for example. If you compare our health system to those, the big opportunities are in the clinical departments. Our basic science departments do pretty well if you compare them side by side to other high-performing centers, but our clinical departments is where we have real opportunity to grow NIH-funded research, which sort of doesn't sound intuitive when you think about it, but really that is where we need to grow in order to get to the next level. So again, we're delighted with the progress we've made, and we look forward to working together on really moving this health system forward. Curator Phillips, is there anything else you wanted me to point out? Or? I
think you've summarized well the great work that you've done since becoming the dean, and we really appreciate your efforts and the collaboration that we see going on. Before you leave and I open it for questions, I want to comment that the Health Affairs Committee actually has 2 people that are not board members. That's permitted under our CCRs. And I saw that Ron Ashworth from St. Louis, who has a wealth of healthcare experience, has come, and would like to introduce him. He comes in from St. Louis for our meetings and brings his expertise and is an active participant. We also have one other from Columbia that I don't think is here. But we appreciate having that kind of sounding board for what's going on. I think we can open it for questions. It was a terrific report from both of you. Thank you.
Thank you.
If I would just like to comment, in today's environment, running a health system is very difficult. Running a health system and aligning it with an academic health institution is really extraordinary, and both of you and your entire teams, I want you to know that but I think the entire board realizes that you are accomplishing really remarkable things, and that you will accomplish more remarkable things in the coming year.
Well, thank you.
Questions? Well, thank you very much.
I have one question.
Yeah.
Jonathan, you had mentioned before that you were in the process of hiring someone to kind of take advantage of some philanthropy. Yes. And how's that going?
Yeah. Thank you for asking that, Curator Chapman. We now have a associate vice chancellor for philanthropy, Robert Driver. He is actively working on coming up with the resources that will be more focused, if you will, on clinical operations and the hospital in general. I do think this is a major opportunity for us, and I've said as much to him, and I think that if we will invest the resources in it for a grateful patient program, that's where a lot of philanthropy will come from, is the patients that over time get their care, family gets their care, and they want to participate with us. Stay tuned, but keep asking that question.
Thank you so much. I think the committee needs to move to go into executive session. So would want to...
You have some minutes to approve.
Oh, we got minutes. Do we actually... Have they been circulated? I'm not sure that the minutes have been circulated from the last meeting.
I think Cindy...
Pardon? Oh, September 28th. All right. Well, those are ready. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes from September 28th?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? Mr. Chairman, I would move that the minutes be approved.
We don't have to.
We don't have to. All right.
Committee.
Now, we need to move into executive session. So, motion from the committee to move into executive session.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstained? Motion passes.
Good.
I think that concludes our report.
Okay, the Board of Curators will be in executive session and will be in recess until tomorrow at 9 a.m.